Hey there, community. Jason Rahm here for DevCentral Connect, and we are in episode 2 of a 6-part series that we're doing on AS3 foundations. And bring up real quick here, we had the episode 1 last week earlier this week, just kind of talking about what the heck is AS3. And then today we're setting some foundation on the tools that we're going to use while we go through the rest of the series. And so, and of course, if you are a friend of the show, you probably have already seen Ben on before, because we've talked about the F5 extension a couple times. But we're going to kind of go through, feature by feature, kind of talk about how that's going to help us in our journey on this series. And so, without further ado, let me bring in Ben. Ben, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm back, excited to chat with everybody, and I have hair this time.
Yeah, it's interesting, like during the COVID era, to see, when we're all remote, we don't see each other all the time. Of course, we're out of that now and starting to go to events, and, the roadshow, got to see some people for the first time in like 4 years and all that. But yeah, seeing everybody's, the growing it out or shaving it off or, all that, one of the guys, Chris Miller, went from, maybe a little bit of a beard. Now he's got like a man beard, like, Duck Dynasty, make the Duck
Full
Dynasty
on.
guys proud beard.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. All right. Well, we're going to talk about VS Code today and the F5 extension for that around AS3. But before we get into that, what general advice would you have for people who have not yet started their journey with AS3? Maybe they have not even done any kind of automation yet, or maybe they've done some imperative work with the REST interface, but nothing on the declarative side. Do you have any nuggets of wisdom to share before we dive in?
Yeah. I could just talk about my journey, and I know that automation is kind of the key to moving forward, key to making things better, key to being more efficient, right? And what I've seen with some customers, particularly in my lab environment, with automation, I was able to get rid of a lot of my errors and make things a lot easier so I could focus on other cooler things. When I was first learning AS3 or even the declarative interfaces of F5, I really struggled with having to learn JSON and REST endpoints and all the other things that go along with it. And that's kind of what brought me around to the VS Code extension. So for the people starting out, it is a great place. It doesn't do all of your automation, but it is a great place to learn, and it facilitates integrating and calling those API endpoints, building the declarations, making modifications, and it really kind of put guardrails on all the sharp edges that I had to learn in the beginning. So, but from a global standpoint or a bigger perspective, AS3 is kind of the front door of automating big IP, right? That's all of your applications reside there, or it can. And normally that's where administrators of big IP are going to spend most of their time, and being able to deploy an application as a single call, delete that application as a single call, or make modifications in a single instance, kind of like an IAP. I think there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, for sure. We have some comments from the gallery. Mark Dittmer, hey, welcome to the show. And Daniel Wolf, MVP, regards from Frankfurt. Good to see you, Daniel. And
nice.
Okay, well, why don't we get into this? So the first one that we were going to talk about, as far as if I can bring up my banners here, we're going to talk about snippets. So let me bring your screen in here. What are snippets? How does that help us?
Okay, so snippets. In VS Code, there's the idea of having snippets of code or text that quickly fit into any kind of project or thing that you're doing. Now, for our perspective, relating that to the automated tool chain and AS3 in specific, snippets are a quick way for us to get a declaration and start modifying it to fit our needs, or just to play around with the solution. The quickest way to do that, one, is to make sure that you have the VS Code extension installed. You can see that with the big F5 over here, and it's under the extensions. But I have mine set up to where if I double click, it will open up an editor. And this one opens up one in JSON language, so that way it understands that I'll be writing in JSON. Those are two important facts. From here, I'll just start typing. If I type AS, it'll pop up and give me some snippets or recommendations to fulfill. It's also here for the other extensions. So we have telemetry streaming, right? I can do a sample, or I can do declarative onboarding, or even cloud failover. But for us, in this AS3 extravaganza, we're just going to type AS, and it shows us our one example. Keep in mind, this is also extendable on a per user basis. So you can create custom snippets for your particular environment, and they'll show up under certain scenarios. And here is our code snippet. So within a couple of keystrokes, within a second, I have an example AS3 declaration provided by the extension. That's a snippet.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because especially we'll actually probably do a little bit of that when we get later in the series. So first we're going to work on migrating stuff, and then once we get a little bit wet under our feet, or get our feet wet a little bit on migrating things and looking at what AS3 looks like, we'll maybe do some scratch garden, and starting from something more of a skeleton code, which is kind of what you have there.
Yeah.
All right, we have Jose. Welcome. Jose's got like the cutest little kid. I love it when he's joining, because I get to see that smiley little face.
Cuteness overload.
Yep, for sure. Okay, next, schema validation. I see in your example right up there, you've got you're declaring a schema in your little template there. So what is that providing for us?
This is where the power of VS Code really starts to shine. Now that I have an editor, VS Code knows that the language is JSON, so it understands the structure and the data in there. Now, as you can see in line 2, I'm referencing a schema. And this is where VS Code will go out and download the schema that validates the JSON that we have here, or the declaration. So what this does is this schema allows VS Code to give you real-time feedback of what you're modifying in the declaration, whether it's valid or not. So as we see here, we have line 3, it's class of AS3 that helps us understand that what's happening in this hierarchy of the class. Line 4, action deploy. But with line 2 referencing that external schema, if I open up another line and open up some brackets, all these options are coming from that schema. I've got real-time feedback about what my options are and what things I can modify in different pieces of the declaration. So if I want to do something like, you know, log level, now I have all different options about levels I want to set in logging. If I come into another area, like in the application, if I open up brackets, now I have context specific feedback about what this declaration should accept. And so I can put a label here and I'll just say sample 1. Now, since this has been validated by a schema, when I deploy it, I have way more chance of actually deploying an application getting success than I do of just trying to send declarations over and over, waiting for feedback from the endpoint. Make sense?
Yeah, totally. And that makes me think one of the things that I've been trying to do is like kind of evaluate all the different ways that you can do certificates within
Yeah.
AS3, whether you're referencing shared objects or you're uploading net new, or you're trying to whatever, all the different options that you have in there, and having the schema to be able to help with all the keywords within the cert object, certainly it's certainly helpful on that end.
Huge. Yeah. Huge.
Yep. Okay. Host's view. What is this?
Okay. So now that we've talked about where the VS Code really started as an idea and the original pain points that put things together and made it a workforce, what do we do with that? And what we're going to do is we're going to connect to F5s and we're going to start deploying some applications. And the host view is really the main view that happens. So over here under our big IPs, we have our host. This is where you can start adding devices, all your big IPs in your environment. I typically recommend you start with dev, test, QA, deploy applications, get familiar with the automation tools, and then you can integrate the things that you're doing here into bigger pipelines, whether that's your Ansible, Terraform, ServiceNow, things like that. But in this host view, you can create big IP connections. And like I have here in my lab, you could put into different folders, but it will also cache your credentials. So I just connected to one of my core devices in my lab. It remembered my password. It's going to do a bunch of discovery. And this is where we pivot from just working locally to actually connecting and integrating with an F5 device, the host view.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you have any number of hosts that you can add in, and then beyond just the top bucket there, down below, I noticed in your documentation examples, down there, if you click down there.
Documentation examples?
Yeah, or maybe it was down there. There was a, right when it first loaded, the extension anyway, had the
Which one?
example, sorry, the example quick view, but that's not really the host, so we can move on. I'll cut that later for those who are going to see this not live in snippets. I had a it's like shiny object, and I was interested in it, but it's not related to host views, so we can move on. Got a couple
We'll be
comments
here later.
Yeah, that's right. Brian, welcome to the show. Central Texas. All right. And
Hey,
then
Brian.
Sebastian, hey team.
Sebastian.
Watching this gem from the beach. Hopefully you're feeling better. I know that I talked, I guess, Twitter messaged Sebastian a little bit the other day, and he wasn't feeling so good. So hope you're feeling better, buddy. All right. So host view, let's go on. Installing toolchain services. So you've got the extension, and that's like kind of the core, but there's other things that you can install. And so, and before you show it, I'll say I wrote a Python script, and I was working on that. It's like, man, working through all the stuff to download and use those tools in my own environment. But yeah, you have it's like a couple clicks and done, right?
Yeah. Side note, there were a couple pieces of downloading and uploading files, the bits, and having to wrap around all the little packets that you had to send. Some of those actually took me months to actually figure out and get working. So there's probably 24 pieces that we had to finally get working together, and that all happened over probably 2 years to get this particular flow. But like you were saying, the next piece is going to be installing the automated toolchain services. So over here under our big IP, so when you connect to a big IP, it'll detect that, and then it'll give you some information about what automated toolchain services are already installed. And you'll see this in some of our API calls over here, right? What services are already there? And right now we have automated toolchain, fast, AS3, declarative onboarding, and telemetry streaming. If it's not installed, you can also use this menu to install it. So orange means that we have it installed, but it's on an older version. Telemetry streaming means it's on its latest. So we got a green dot here. If you see me hovering, I can uninstall the RPM. So I can uninstall this service from the F5, or if I go to like AS3, I can install the latest. And so this particular workflow, now that I'm connected to an F5, I know the API endpoints. This will download the latest RPM from the GitHub repo to your local computer or wherever the VS Code instance is running. It will then upload it to the F5 and install it for you. So this really greases the tracks and allows this to be kind of a workstation and get the automated tool change installed or even updated so we can start using them. And that's installing the automated tool chain services.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic, right? Because I work like it's kind of a pain. You're downloading files, then you're uploading files, and you actually have to install those files, and to just be able to clickety click like a couple times in the editor and you're done is a fantastic thing. And also, we're not really focused in this series on declarative onboarding or telemetry streaming, but if you're going to move to the declarative model now versus down the road with Big IP next, certainly check into those things. And functionally they work like the AS3. There's with declarative onboarding anyway, there's a few nuances that are a little different, but yeah, those are available. So if you're starting your journey with AS3, don't ignore those other two for Big IP. But for Big IP next, those two particular don't move forward. All right, let's go to the Config Explorer. What are we looking at there?
All right. So as you alluded to earlier, Config Explorer is where we get down and dirty with your existing config. When I was in PS, I spent a lot of time slicing and dicing configs, copying config files, ripping out applications, and this is what I did for migrations, helping customers move from one device to another, splitting up environments, consolidating environments. And this tool was really understanding, especially even if you're working with support or just working locally, understanding what the configuration for that application looks like without having to click through the UI. Maybe you want to convert it to AS3. Maybe you just want to copy it. But it allowed me to really dig into the configuration and understand what we were working with here. So the Config Explorer is another project that I dubbed a corkscrew, because we kind of dig into the configuration and rip things out. You can import a configuration file, a UCS, or a QK view. There's a whole link to the documentation. Or we could just load an example QK view. This is what I use for tests or in my local lab. So I'll close this window here, and we'll load the example QK view. This is going to get downloaded. You can see we downloaded it from GitHub. We went through and parsed a bunch of the files, abstracted the applications, and then we give you a little breakdown of the different object counts. You can also see that by hovering here. So this gives you some information about Configuration Explorer and the QK view that you looked at. How many virtual servers, profiles, policies, if you have some GTMs going on with some DNS, right? Servers, pools, wide IPs, how many APM profiles or policies, along with ASM, bot, and DOS, your source software version, a couple other things. So the intent here is to kind of give you an idea of the size and complexity of your configuration and allow you to rip out those applications. The next step down is sources. Typically not going to look here, but you can see all the different files that were part of the abstraction process. And if you want, if we miss something in that abstraction process, you click on the sources here and it'll give you all of it together. So from here, we can quickly do a Control F and look for nodes, or we can search the configuration for specific application features. Just something good to know there. The big
That
thing that we're going to be
that's
interested in.
actually,
Yep.
just to interrupt you for a second, that's actually the a fantastic thing from sources is that I don't know that unless you're messing with it every single day, you really know how all the different pieces get split up in the file system. And
Right.
so, just being able to download it in here, you get a quick view of, wow, okay, my config split across all those different files. So if you're going to do copying out just an application or just an application within a partition, all that's presented very clearly there. Now, this was probably no small feat in parsing the the big IP configuration. This one, you mentioned 2 years on the last one. How long did it take you to get through this effort? That looks like it was monumental.
Yeah. So the first part was creating a function that would sift through the QK view, right? Kind of unpack it in memory and sift through and pull out the files we needed. Once we did that, the process goes through each one of the files and it actually starts looking for parent. Oh, it took a while to play with all the different functions, but it looks for parent objects. So anything like auth source with an open bracket and then a closing bracket. And then we break high level, we break all this into a nested JSON tree so I can search it. It would be like ltm.node, and then these would be the names and the objects on the inside. So we try to take all the parent objects, LTM nodes, LTM virtual servers, DDoS profiles, GTM pools, things like that, and turn them into a nested JSON tree that we can easily search and abstract details as we're digging out applications. And that's just kind of been an ongoing effort.
Gotcha. Yeah, this effort seems like it would be a good entry for the advent of code exercises that they do, maybe on a smaller scale. But it's that kind of pattern matching and all that sometimes gets me because they're like, holy cow, that's so much to think about.
It's been fun trying to demo and look into the different ways to parse the config. You have official config parsers or text parsers out there. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. And this one seems to be working pretty good for now. It's actually pretty performant. It blew up Node a couple times in the early stages, but we've gotten it to a point where it's working. So I'll stick with it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off on a tangent.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this stuff, right? It's kind of like you said, the advent of code. It's you can write your own story, but it can also be very complicated, and you can do things how you want. You're not waiting for somebody else to fix a bug. You're not asking for features, but you're way more in control of the path that you desire, and that was part of the fun here of writing all that. So the next piece is going to be moving from sources to partitions. This breaks down all of your different partitions. And if you see the colored symbols here, this is all about the diagnostics we'll get into in a minute. But right here, you can see the different applications, and we can just easily loop through them. The numbers on the side represent the number of parent objects that are here. So like this 80, it's just a virtual server, so it's 1. This 80 actually redirects using the system HTTP redirect I rule to this one. So we have 4 pieces. You have your LTM virtual, which I can collapse. You have your pool, that's object number 2, and your 2 nodes. So this is 3 and 4. So this allows you to quickly look through your applications and see how complex they are and see which ones and maybe copy them, right? So we can move on to something like this. And this does inspect LTM policies and even I rules to try to abstract pool members, nodes, and things like that. So it does a little bit deeper than some of the high level things you might see here.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Um, Things that you might be interested in outside of regular applications, all of your DNS. So if you have FQDNs for GTM, DNS, GSLB, you'll see them here. And this is an application parse configuration. One thing, if you're migrating or looking, knowing all the possible destinations of a particular wide IP would be very interesting. So you don't have to go through the config and understand all the pools and hierarchy and fallback, things like that. We just pull them out, stick them in here. The next one is going to be ASM policies, just to understand how many ASM policies are on the box. whether they're blocking or not. You can see that here. So just a little bit of visibility in what's happening from a WAF perspective. Then we have APM profiles, so knowing that the parent APM profile, not all the VP stuff associated with it, but at least we can see the basics and how many APM profiles. Any questions so far?
No, I guess
Okay.
around ASM and APM policies,
Mhm.
from a config exploring, like those aren't necessarily always, that friendly from a text perspective, and so we'll get in down the road, but are there some like roadblocks or stoppers around ASM and APM that you've hit along the way from it being able to be converted, in VS Code without additional work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first one is going to be ASM. ASM, the heart of its configuration actually lives in a database. So we would have to go get the database, unpack it, get the ASM WAF policy out. We actually have other tools and initiatives that are working on that right now. So they definitely have way more experience in that realm. Just showing the ASM policies and kind of their high level complexity was kind of my initial goal here, just to kind of understand what the box was doing. For APM, it's not a separate database, but the configurations do balloon pretty quickly with all the different VPEs and objects referencing themselves, things like that. So again, I think this initial round of features was really just to provide visibility into how many profiles and what the box is doing at a high level.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Before we move on real quick, got another, uh, uh, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Matuz, I'm going to guess Matuz. Um, and welcome to the show. And then Carl, back on feature number 4 on the installation of the ATC components. Huge time saver versus doing that in the GUI. Um, I'm guessing that was the timing of that when that comment came in. But yeah. Okay, so moving on, diagnostics. What are the benefits here? First of all,
All
what is
right.
it, and how does that benefit us?
Okay, so we're in the Configuration Explorer, and we've been able to see how we can break apart a QKView, a UCS, or even a comp file, understand the applications and all the data around it, whether that's APM profiles or other services the box are doing. But what if we want to move those applications, or what if we want to understand about maybe some deprecated iRule functionality, things like that? This is where diagnostics comes into play. And this is also what shows up in our tree here. So the red, orange, or green, or even there's yellow is kind of informational, warning, or error. And initially, this was just for understanding which applications could move to distributed cloud and kind of ways to do that. So if we go into here and we look at this forwarder, we are getting a red squiggly line, and it's telling us from a distributed cloud perspective, multi-port load balancers are not supported, or wildcard VIPs are not supported in distributed cloud. It's a different way of doing things. And we can also look at our problems here. And so what this does is this, I'll get into tuning the rule set here in a second, but at a high level, this gives us a very quick feedback about how many applications or what applications could move to different technologies, whether it could be adjusted for next in the future. This is distributed cloud now. We could even put rules in here for Nginx, right? So this is really just giving us a lot of visibility into the features and the configuration objects of an application and providing feedback. So here we see another one where the virtual server references local traffic policies. This is really just providing a heads up. Go look at your LTM policy and see if there's anything in there that would prevent it from moving to distributed cloud. Things like this is informational. We can see the hover here, and it just says, "Hey, this is a virtual server where we detected the default HTTPS redirect." So we'll take this information and look at the rule set, and then we'll come back and kind of put it all together. If you have a complex environment, or you have some particular use cases or scenarios where you need to tweak the rule set for your needs, that is easily done under this diagnostic. So I can turn it off, everything's cleared. I can turn it back on, and it reruns all the diagnostics. I can also modify. So this is really important, right? The rule set allows us to provide, to modify and create new rules in real time and that for specific to our environment. So here we can see a code. This is just a code for us to easily identify the rule as the set it grows. The severity is what drives whether it's a green squiggly, a yellow squiggly, a red, or an orange. So that's how we get our different severities, and that's what sets all of our colors on the left. We have a quick title, and then a message. A message is a little bit more details in the title, and we can put links, and I think there's even support for Markdown in the future. But the big thing that we're going to be worried about is the regex. So this regex is just what pulls out line. It goes through the configuration or the application we're looking at and pulls out line by line. And so we can identify things in the configuration and help give diagnostics. Keep in mind, all this stuff is kind of put together and bundled in this report. So you can easily modify it and take things out or add notes to it as you're going. But this is where, like here, we use a regex to pick out where virtual servers, HTTP profiles, or even pools, snap pools are matching across services. Make sense?
Yeah, you know what I should have done is talk to you about this before so that we do like a top 10 countdown. And dude, this would be number one. Holy cow. I didn't know that I didn't know that this was in here. I didn't know you could do this. So building
Yeah.
rule sets is awesome because like you said, it's a tool that can be reused for other technologies. So like whether, you're just going from big IP config to AS3 on big IP classic, or if you're going to R series or Velos type VEs, or if you're going to big IP next, because there are going to be some rule sets for technology that isn't moving forward into next, or it's moving forward but it's going to be different, and being able to flag those kinds of things, wow. So I'm just kind of mind blown over here right now. uh,
Right.
yeah,
So
that's really cool.
this is there's a lot of conversations going on internally about kind of where to take this and where to add rules, and I'm really kind of running with the idea that you can just modify the rules as needed. If you think the rules are globally, they work for other people, open up a GitHub issue, provide some feedback. I'll release that in the next version. But we were also talking about rules and kind of conversion policies, or even future compatibility between old code and new code, and things like this. This is one of those examples to where we're looking at an rule for particular value, and we can start to give you errors or warnings, things like that. You can also modify this rule set to identify different applications and put them in different categories, whether that would be production or non-prod or tier one applications. So I think the rule set is immensely flexible, and it puts the power in the user to continue and modify as needed.
Is it one big rule set, or is it customizable to where you can have like a 2XC, 2 next, 2 Nginx? Is that just going to be, yeah?
I don't know yet. Right now, it's just this one rule set, and it updates with the application. And I think we can get it updating in other ways. Right now, there's several of them, or maybe 2 dozen, and then I've got a bunch of empty ones here for growth, right? So if I do like test one, and then regex would be app 4. I can Control S to save that, or if we go to the top here, right, I can click on this button. And now the app 4 gave me a hint. So if I change and go back to app 4, this hint was that rule I just put in there.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. That's really cool and powerful, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, easy to
Okay.
modify, easy to move forward, right? If I change that to hint to error and save it, now all my errors show up.
Yeah. Okay.
Instant feedback.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. So, in your own instance of the extension, you can change those rules to fit your needs, right? Now, I'm guessing those would get blown over when you do an update. Like if you have your own rule set in there.
Yeah, and that's why I do recommend either, open a GitHub issue and we'll just integrate them back into the product. If it's unique to your environment, you probably don't want to share them anyways, but always welcome the feedback.
Yeah, cool. All right, moving on. That's by far my favorite so far. Only maybe not my favorite overall, but definitely my favorite today because it's like the first time I've seen that in action. So I'm excited about that. All right, converting configs to AS3. So in fact, in preparation for this series, before you get to there, I was referencing an article from Rodrigo Albuquerque, who kind of talked about the basics of getting started with AS3. He's like, well, today you can't convert configs to AS3, so it's really kind of a net new. But since that article came out, you actually can. So yeah, show us what that's about.
Right. So there's a little history here. The actual conversion happens from a project called the ACC, AS3 Configuration Converter, and that was something that F5PD did, like a couple years ago, right? And so that is wrapped into another VS Code extension called F5 Chariot, and you can also get that from the marketplace. You can see that here. And this is really just wrapping that engine and enabling it as a right click within VS Code. But what we're going to do here is we have our one application, right? I opened up this first application. It's got 4 objects. From here, I can just right click and convert with ACC. And this will take the text of the TMOS application. It will feed it to the ACC engine, and then it provides an AS3 output and some logging. And this is our converted application. So we went from TMOS to AS3 with just a click. And that's at its essence is converting an AS3 application. There are other methods and there's other things to know about this, but at least you have the bulk of the frame of an AS3 declaration. You can easily deploy that in other ways. If you're looking for more of a guided configuration, right? Talk about F5 Journeys tool that's going to do a bit more deeper inspection of a QK view or UCS, probably UCS, and work through the applications and help you migrate to other technologies. But in VS Code, this is the simple right click method to take TMOS and generate AS3.
Yeah, that's the first time you shared that on the show way back, it's like easy button, right? Are there any challenges with, so you convert there to AS3 from a green application? Are there considerations like if it's yellow, orange, or red? Does it look at status to give you some kind of a, hey, these are not green, so XYZ? Or is that just like if you try to convert the red, would it just spit out AS3 whether or not it was going to work?
Good question. The diagnostics and feedback are completely independent of the conversion process. I think the conversion will work if the schemas line up, or it'll do the best job that it can. From there, that's where the expertise comes back in, because you're going to need to modify the AS3. You're going to need to kind of customize it going forward. This is just the bulk forklift over. And from here, you'd start thinking about, how do I want to group my applications? Do I want to put them in different tenants? Do I want to put them in different ways? Do I want multiple applications? Do I want to spread them out into more tenants? There's also things about certificate management and how do I want to do things differently. So really, this is just starting that bridge and starting to get users moving in the direction. Remember the schema, the reference we have here. So now I can come in and I have the framework of this application, at least the name. And there goes my bot trying to fill in more details for me. But I can just add stuff, right? I can do an admin state, allow VLANs. I can customize this application. And there's also other workflows to where this can be converted into a template or some sort of service catalog through ServiceNow or something like that, to where we're going from an older infrastructure with just TMOS to something that's automatable and deployable via end users.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, you answered Daniel's question there. Can you convert to AS3 Magic with ASM policies too? And I think that answer today is like no, because that most of that config is in a database. So it's like you can get to the bones of an AS3 declaration, but there's some additional work that's going to have to be done before you can actually deploy that.
Yes, ACC does the TMOS, so the application side of things, and maybe even the AS3 reference and the local traffic policy, but the actual profile and the WAF policy that's being loaded, that is not handled here. So that's going to be extra work.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Okay. Next is we have the reviewing AS3 window.
All right. So we've connected, we've made some AS3 declarations, we've migrated some applications. Now that we've deployed, we're connected to an F5 here, right? I'm connected to my core. It shows me all my different services along the bottom here. I also have an AS3 declaration. All of these things line up. The VS Code extension will enable you to deploy these. So if I do a right click, right, we can post this AS3 declaration, but I can also post do, since I have declarative onboarding installed, telemetry streaming. Once we have applications installed, we can also look at what is installed on the big IP and get feedback. This is the other side of AS3. So now I can see that in the common shared, I have an AS3 declaration, and then also have an external proxy, and I can click on this. And this is my declaration for my external proxy that I was playing with. So we can easily see the different AS3 applications that have been deployed. We can see a breakdown of the internal applications, maybe how many pieces are in each one of these. And if you're really interested, we can do a right click and do the expanded tenant. And this gives us all of the options, and including the default options. So now we have a better idea of what AS3 is doing for us instead of just kind of guessing.
Right. Yeah, because like when you send a declaration, you don't have to send it in entirety. You send the parts that you care about, and AS3 does the rest.
Yep, the unique and interesting things. And then when you're done, right, like if I have this common shared, I can just delete the tenant. And this will delete that common tenant.
And boom.
Yeah. So instead of calling
we're
it
gonna
via
talk about
Postman.
common. Yeah, we're gonna talk about common later in the series, and like leading into, I think that might be one of the last shows before. No, we got actually it's after the nope. I'm looking at my thing here. Yeah, that's a 5th episode, and then we'll do best practices right after that.
Sweet.
So, okay, so reviewing AS3 window, and then I said we had. Let me see, we got 2 more here. All right, this one also was like I'd asked you, it's like, hey, I know that sometimes in AS3 declarations, like sharing iRules as strings gets kind of messy. How do you? I see it encoded in v64. Is there a way, to do that in VS Code? It's like, dude, that's already built in. I'm like, of course it is. So yeah, show us an example of that, because that's crazy cool. For I know it's supported for iRules, and it's supported for certs. But actually, when you're converting the configs to AS3, it's also doing that as part of that conversion, right? It just automatically does that.
Yes, AS3 can take iRules as regular text, but it depending on the complexity, it certainly is recommended to encode iRules. It can take certificates and things like that. And base 64 encoding them just kind of gets rid of any of the character escapes and things like that could cause problems during an import.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking for here is that we have, that's text. I had somewhere in here. We can do something else, but like you were saying, that they're base 64 encoding or decoding that stuff. You've got to copy it. You've got to put it into another window or tool online. You got to copy and paste back and forth. But from here, we can just highlight it and do a right click. So we can base 64 encode, and so now we have that string. Or I can do a right click again and decode it. So I can encode and decode. Just be careful that if you go too many far too many times in one direction, it's hard to get back because you'll get lost.
So yeah, no supporting of it's not crypto here, right? You're not supporting multiple rotations, and yeah.
Yeah, have fun doing this a couple different times and then trying to get back. I've been there and done that, but having this as a simple right click has definitely made my life a ton easier.
Yeah, that's another easy button, and all these, it's like really the whole point is it like what's that book, Automate the Boring Stuff. It's
Right?
like it's like working through in like your workflows, whether it's coding or whether it's working through your inbox and email. It's like, what can you do to automate the boring stuff? And there's nothing exciting about converting strings back and forth, from regular string to an encoded string. And so being able to just make that happen, that's pretty awesome. All right, wrapping
Make it
up
a
here.
workbench.
Yeah, wrap it up here. This last one's technically cheating because we had 9, but I said it was a top 10, and I want to be a man of my word. So it's cheating. It's not necessarily directly related to our AS3 series, but after the AS3 series, fast is going to be important to the content I'm writing for things that will come with our big IP next journey. And so talk to me about fast. First, what is fast? And then what do you do to support it here in the editor?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to talk about fast. Fast is something that F5 has put a lot of work into and a lot of time and thought. And the idea here is that it's basically Ansible's Jinja templates on steroids, but it wraps it in a bunch of other features and functionality that makes it really easy to view the templates and fill them in. And there's also a bunch of cool stuff on the backside to lay templates on top of each other. And this is really envisioned to be kind of the replacement for IApps. It definitely doesn't do everything that IApps does because it doesn't integrate with the TMOS system, but it does provide a great place to template any string, not just AS3, but you can even do declarative onboarding, right? You can do API calls. You can templatize Nginx configs. It's pretty powerful in a bunch of different ways. But in our use today, it's mainly around fast and on typical TMOS, and that is migrating into Big IP Next, where you're going to use fast templates to define applications and then deploy those applications across the globe as fleets, right? So this is kind of a story that's building in the long run. The first thing I want to talk about is that, and we won't go into too much deal, but fast templates is really just a templated string with a bunch of parameters. They're typically in YAML. The first one here is, as in a good example, this one has some defaults. So I can have defaults that can easily be overridden by users. And this is our AS3 string that we have in here. It's just a string. We're just templating things out. But from here, if you right click and go to render the fast template, this runs the template to the fast engine and provides the HTML output. So this is what you see in TMOS and Big IP, and you can see the defaults here. So I'm going to change this to foo bar number 1, right? Application could be awesome app. And we can add parameters here depending on what's in the fast template. We can also get information from applications, things like that. We can add pool members. And this gives a really nice UI to build applications in a templated fashion. Simple. You don't have to know about certificates or ASM policies or all the other pieces that you might put in there. This is just templating of the application. So once we've rendered this HTML output from the template that we're authoring or creating or modifying, we can put in some details and then we can render that output. And this allows us to see exactly what's going to be sent to the engine. And we can even do a right click and post this AS3 declaration. So again, this is not an automation tool. It's an automation tooling platform. So we're helping you build automation, helping you build AS3, test it, build the fast templates, test them, see what their output is. And once you have all this working in a dev or QA environment, you can start putting this into a bigger automation solution. Those are pretty much, that's an intro to fast templates.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And that's going to be critical going forward, as a building block on top of AS3 for everything that's coming. I do have a comment here from Mark. and it's like, hey, we need to add per app API to the extension. So, that is, or per API, app per
We do.
API to the extension. So, so is that issue out on GitHub already? Or if it's
Not
not, Mark,
yet.
go drop it now, like even before the show's over. So as soon as Ben's done with us, he can go jump on that, and it'll be out by, let me see, next Friday, right? So
Yeah, I'll get right on that. Yeah, I think that the per app thing was something, pulling back the sheets a little bit, the per app thing was something that Fast was doing for us, because it would see the other applications in a tenant and stitch them together. But I think they recently moved a lot of that features into AS3, so you don't need Fast, and you can stitch applications together without having to redeploy that same declaration every time. So I think that it's some really cool features, and I'm excited to get that integrated.
yeah, cool. Yeah. And I think Mark has a video on per app API as well on his channel. So
Okay.
if I'll try and share that out in the comments later. I need to check that out myself, because I haven't seen. I don't know that I totally grok it yet in the the use case and the benefit. So
It might be
I
your
will
next
be.
guest in discussion.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, Mark, the offer's out there. You want to join and talk about that? That would be awesome. Um, so yeah, well, Ben, as always, thank you. I love, the ease in which life is with, all this automation stuff, because of what you've done with the F5 extension. Of course, not related to this series, but the iRules extension that James did as well. That
Awesome.
folds
He
in
started it
very
all.
nicely with the F5 extension, being able to roll iRules straight out from the editor. And so I'm moving it from beta to GA. Okay, so yeah, look forward to seeing that for the per API. Yep. Okay, so Ben, thank you so much, and as always, we will reach out to you as you bring bigger and better things to the extension. I know there's some other projects that you're working on with that we'll take a look at, unrelated to what we're talking about today. And so I'm sure we'll have you back someday soon.
Thank you for the opportunity. Take care.
All right, appreciate it. All right, everyone. Well, that's the show. That's what I got. I hope you learned a lot. I'm still like mind blown over the diagnostic stuff. So I'm excited about digging into that, and we will dig into that, because we're going to look at some. We're going to load in some UCSs in next show, because we're going to take what he showed in a brief couple of minutes, and we're going to spend the whole show exploring and reviewing configs and what we can and can't do with those next time. And so join me again Monday. I think we're at 9 a.m. Pacific next Monday for episode 3. And until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic week, finish of the week, and a nice weekend. And I'll see you back on Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific. Take care, everyone.
Well, thanks for checking out that video. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. While you're down there, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You might want to check out one of these videos over here. And if you haven't already, go check out community.f5.com. This is where all the DevCentral Connects hosts hang out, as well as the rest of the community. It's free to sign up, and we'll see you there.